Hymns House, episode 13. I'm Jonathan Stern. I'm here with Lewis Stevens and Dr. H. Firstly, welcome to 60, 65, 70 new members. There's been a ton of news, and we'll get into that in a moment. I think the influx of people into Hymns House is mostly attributed to the news that came out today. In any case, welcome. And if you have not joined the Discord, be sure to hop in. Link is in the show notes and on Twitter. That is where the discussion is after the show. Today, wanted to talk about the Amazon news that just dropped. Let's see. They announced pricing on all sorts of treatment options that Hims also offers. We have hair loss at $16 a month, skincare at $10 a month, ED at $19 a month, eyelash growth, $43 a month, motion sickness, $2 per use. Notably, Amazon is still not doing weight loss, so there is a key difference there between what Amazon's doing and what Hims offers. Consultations, final thing here, consultations, $29 for messaging, $49 for video. That's really the top level highlights of the Amazon announcement. Some are saying that there's really no new news since the June telehealth announcement, which contains much of this information as well. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. H, and you, Lewis. What did each of you think about the announcement and specifically how it pertains to Hims?
Oh, when I first saw it, I was a little bit sort of confused because we had already seen this back in June. Hat tip to MV Kuna on Twitter X, who mentioned the same thing. There's a Forbes article that mentioned this same news back in June when Amazon Clinic was switching over to rebranding to Amazon One, offering this pay-per-visit service, $29 for the text messaging service, $49 for the video chat. And interesting, on that same day, the Hims stock dropped 7%, probably as a reaction to this news. My impression of this is that I think it does interact with Hims in a certain way in that the patient panel that would be interested in this Amazon service would probably be the ones that are most interested in getting a medicated treatment for, the lowest price possible, because Amazon is only offering generic medicines. You may have some Hims people jumping ship per se to try to get a better price. They go doctor shopping, they go service shopping, and just try to cut their costs as much as possible. This, to me, it's kind of like a test. It's a challenge from the big dogs, Amazon, versus the startup company Andrew Dudum, who's said multiple times now in the past couple of weeks, couple of months, he wants to guide the direction of this company to more personalized custom treatments. And we saw with the recent earnings reports that a bit over 50% of Hims patients are on some kind of a customized treatment. So they've been steering the ship for a while to go away from strictly generic medicines. They still offer it, but now we're seeing what's going to play out. Are people going to jump ship and just get the lowest price medicine that they can get their hands on, or do they get a taste of Hims' products where there's extra convenience from taking only one medicine versus three, maybe at a slightly higher price point? But we'll see if those people are going to switch over to a more cheaper option. I do think that the pricing that Amazon offers for the medicine itself is very compelling. They mentioned $26 for a 3-month supply of tadalafil. That price is actually pretty on par with what you can get at almost any other pharmacy. You look in GoodRx, you can find CVS, Walmart, Walgreens. They offer that same 3-month supply of tadalafil for about $26 to $50 for the 3-month supply. Not exactly sure how much Hims offers that price for the tadalafil, but it's probably a little bit cheaper through Amazon if you compare directly cost of the medicine for a generic tadalafil versus a generic tadalafil through Hims. The only other thing is the just account for the service fee for doing the consult, $29 for the text only option. I'm imagining that if you go through Amazon, the doctor on Amazon will have you do a follow-up. The usual follow-up time is either 6 months or a year. So you're going to pay that $29 every 6 months or every year. They're not just going to keep automatically renewing it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see over the next little while of the next earnings report if this actually does make a dent in the HIMSS subscription base for people who are paying for those treatments. Lewis, when do you think we'll see in actual numbers if there's an effect of this causing HIMSS patients to jump ship? Is it like in the next quarterly report? Is it two quarters from now? What do you think we'll see?
Well, to answer that question, I would just highlight that X is like an online world that is very detached from the real world. And I've learned this lesson many times in the sense that there will be this consensus thinking on X. There will be all of these ideas going viral on X. And then you go out in the real world and nobody has any idea what is going on X. X is in so many ways totally detached from reality. And to that end, thinking about my own personal experience, I've not heard anything about this Amazon offering. I know nothing about it. I know about HIMSS via my interaction with Facebook, Instagram, Google, but I've never heard of Amazon's pharmacy through using the app. I still I've never interacted with it in any way. And I would wager that there's tens of millions of people, maybe more in America, that have never heard of anything that we're talking about. So I'd be hard pressed to think that it would happen in 6 months, a year. I mean, I personally don't think it'll ever happen because, well, for a variety of reasons. But that's my answer. I don't think we're going to see any impacts, not in the near term, that's for sure.
I mostly agree with you, Lewis. Spoiler alert, I'm a bull. You are as well. We're in charge of HIMSS House. But I do want to make an effort to steel man the argument that HIMSS falling 20% in a single day, and I forgot to mention that at the outset. HIMSS is now down 20%, 22% on this news that Amazon is taking telehealth more seriously. What is the strongest form of the argument that Amazon entering this space or making, a duplicative announcement, making an announcement that they've already made back in June is cause for some concern? Could there be an effect to CAC? Could there be an effect on gross margins? Could there be an effect on the total number of subscribers the company is able to scale to in the future? Paint the bear case. And I do want to get into why maybe this isn't a cause for concern, but let's start with the bear case.
I would defer to Dr. H here. I feel like Dr. H, when we were chatting earlier today, you articulated a compelling bear case to play devil's advocate. But I mean, you had an interesting take on it based on your boots on the ground, firsthand experience with these platforms.
You mentioned real life is different from Twitter. In real life, in the telemedicine world, we're seeing people, a small number actually, who are doctor shopping and service shopping. So there is a small percentage of people who are looking for better prices. I'll see that they're switching from HIMSS or Row or something to a smaller platform where they might have a slightly better price for medicine. And the patients are saying, yeah, I genuinely like this product from HIMSS or Row or whoever. It's just a little expensive and times are a little tough right now, so I'm looking to save some money. So we would prescribe the equivalent generic medicine. We'll see them be on this medicine for a few months. And at that point, they can decide, is this generic version of the customized, personalized treatment offered by HIMSS, is it just as good? Is it good but not as convenient and they don't like it and they switch back to HIMSS? So we see that people will switch providers pretty fluidly. They'll go from HIMSS to a different provider and then back and forth and then go back to HIMSS a few months later when they realize they just like the HIMSS product better, or if their financial situations though more comfortable for them. So I think people are willing to try things, and there are people who are specifically looking for the lowest price possible. And there's other people who are in a situation where they value the convenience and the customized feature of a HIMS, and they don't mind paying a slight premium to have 3 medicines in one or 2 medicines in one. So I think we'll see how much of this affects HIMS based on what percentage of the HIMS subscriber base falls into that category where they just want the lowest price possible. I don't think it's that high based on just seeing the amount of people who are leaving comments about wanting to switch due to costs from HIMS to other places. My bear case would be, if Amazon actually started getting into custom treatments and they have access and are working with compounding pharmacies, then I might get a little bit more worried. I think there's that situation where, okay, now you're going right at what HIMS thinks they're doing as something that's really special. Now they're kind of doing it directly. If you're just offering generic medicines, I mean, there's tons of other places that will offer generic medicines for the same price or even better than HIMS. So, people have said there's no moat. I mean, yeah, I've agreed with people. If you're strictly offering generic medicines, there's tons of places that can offer it. So Amazon is just doing that, basically offering generic medicines. I feel like in terms of competition, the Amazon offering, I feel like it might hurt actually the smaller telemed companies first and more first, like Lemonade, PlushCare, Sesame. These are telemed companies that are doing pretty much just generics only, and they're offering all sorts of treatment options that Amazon is doing, like, hair loss, UTIs, medicines, hair stuff. So a whole wide variety of options. And this is what the other smaller companies are doing, Lemonade. So I feel like the Amazon is more of a direct effect on those first, and maybe to a smaller extent. So that's how I feel about this initial news from Amazon. I would like to see what happens going into the future if they do more of the weight loss or the custom treatments.
Yeah, on the topic of weight loss, any speculation as to why they're not doing that right now? Throw out GLP-1s. I think we have some idea why they're not doing that. There's regulatory uncertainty. But why aren't they doing weight loss at all?
One thing I would speculate is that they're new to the whole telemedicine world and they're just getting their feet wet, having the providers doing things they're comfortable with. Weight loss is a very specialized area of medicine. Not many providers do it in real life. They would defer to a weight loss clinic or things like that. So if Amazon's just doing this and rolling out telemedicine services, they may just be wanting to do some things that are easy, that clinicians are comfortable doing, trying to gauge and see how successful this platform is for these other services before they really jump into the deep end with weight loss. I feel like the same thing with HIMS. They started out with other categories of medicines and treatments that are, quote unquote, easier to do versus something more like weight loss where doctors in telemedicine just aren't used to doing just yet. So that would be one thing I can think of.
So no TRT anytime soon.
I'd be surprised if Amazon did that soon.
All right, Lewis, over to you. I'm ready to hear the reasons that we shouldn't be jumping off ledges on account of this news. You made a post on our Twitter account earlier today referencing Apple and Spotify. Maybe take us through why this isn't that big of a deal.
Sure. And actually, I was driving earlier this morning, and that phrase "jumping off a ledge," I was just driving. I was like, I want to preface everything with ultimately HIMS is a risky equity, right? Boeing went down figuratively and literally in 2019. That was nearly a government-sanctioned duopoly at global scale, and it had a tough time. So everybody, please note that. I've learned that needs to be noted. Unfortunately, I understand most listeners probably understand that business is risky. But so now I'm going to share the why I think people shouldn't be jumping off ledges, which is exactly what I thought. But I thought, this narrative of the company that has this control of massive distribution is going to put another business out of business has been ongoing for decades. Just generally, the idea of the incumbent is going to defeat the little upstart is a narrative that has played out over the last 50 to 100 years, maybe since the beginning of American capitalism. And one good example is in the 1960s, 1970s, many people thought that Walmart couldn't compete with Sears. And then in the 90s, many people thought Amazon couldn't compete with Walmart. And then over the last 3 decades, many people have thought that many companies couldn't compete with Amazon, such as Shopify, which is a good example of a business that created an independent platform serving small and medium-sized businesses, and Amazon created a rival service to that. And the 2010s were attempted to, and ultimately, Shopify was selling off. It was really volatile. The shorts were coming out. I mean, people hated Shopify in the early days. Well, I mean, many of the listeners probably can't even fathom that Shopify was seen in the identical light to that of Hims today. But that was the case. There was, the incumbent large tech companies were, angling to try to get a slice of the pie of Shopify's, I think it does $6 billion in gross profit today, $10 billion of revenue, wherever it's at. So this, I'm just providing historical context. This is not a narrative that's new. It plays out. If you own a business that's sub $10 billion, or even really sub 50 billion, you're going to be confronted by this bear thesis. And then, we're going to have to grapple with the logic of it. And there are instances where the incumbent wins, and Apple has been successful against, tiny little upstarts, tiny little software upstarts over the years.
And I guess the one that comes to my mind in every case is the Microsoft Teams Slack comparison. But it's really the only one I can think of. And I think you noted that as well, like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, Slack's a $30 billion business. So I don't know, who really lost there. Stuart Butterfield's vacationing on an island right now. I don't know who actually lost. But and I have a point there. You have a very good point. But I'm getting at this idea that, and we've talked about it on past podcasts. You have a great idea. You have a great point, Johnny. But my point is that business, I would contend that it's rare that competition or incumbents destroy businesses. It's relatively rare, especially in the public markets. Bad cultures, bad execution, weak cultural characters that don't find new ways to serve customers, that don't evolve, that don't grow as a corporate culture. Those fail. The ones that rapidly evolve, find new ways to serve, continue to innovate, continue to work, like day one mentality, like Amazon, for decades and decades at a time, in some sense, they can't be defeated. Remember my prefacing comments about risk, right? But I'm going to just share a couple examples here. So in the 90s, I think we've talked about it in past podcasts, but in the 90s, Microsoft controlled distribution of the Windows operating system. It controlled the distribution of software in many respects by owning the Windows operating system. So if you wanted an app, if you wanted to field an app, if you wanted to create software, you were going to have to pay the toll, quote unquote, in some form or fashion, of the Windows operating system. And there was only really one other option, which was Mac OS, and Mac OS was beleaguered for many years and held a very small market share, and I think still does today relative to Windows. So Windows essentially had a monopoly. Essentially, it had majority market share, and if you wanted to field software, you had to. I should have turned off the messages, but if you wanted to field software, you had to.
Can you turn those off, Lewis?
I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know how, Johnny. Let me. I don't want to lose my train of thought. I lose my train of thought naturally if I stop.
Continue with the point, sorry.
So if you wanted to field software, you had to go through Windows operating system. And so in the 1990s, Intuit, the maker of TurboTax, created, maybe the whole company was TurboTax at the time, but Intuit today owns TurboTax. And this was the accounting software that the company that Intuit or TurboTax fielded in the 90s. They created this accounting software. And the big bear thesis for Intuit at that time was that Microsoft had fielded a rivaling product called Monday. Freudian slip, because I do like the Monday business. But so Microsoft fielded Money, and that was the big bear thesis for Intuit. And now think about that bare thesis relative to what we're dealing with HEMS, right? Microsoft put the exact software right next to Intuit's software. I mean, it was identical, and they were a click away, right? And Microsoft could have pushed that software aggressively over the decades. And ultimately, what was the net result? Today, Intuit's a very successful business. And then I'll do one more example, and then I'll stop the competition soliloquy here. But Spotify and Apple is another good example in the sense that Spotify, relative to Apple's music product, Spotify is a commodity. There's no difference. You could say, the AI, this or that, but the reality is they are identical products. And so Apple launched Apple Music sometime in the early or mid 2010s. And I remember I was a subscriber of it. I'm a subscriber of Spotify today, but I subscribed to Apple Music at the time. And it's the same thing. It's totally identical. And so Apple has used its distribution, its control of the iOS operating system on the iPhone, which has, I think, about 1.5 billion users globally, to field this identical software. And notwithstanding, and not just field it, Apple was aggressive in the way that it pushed it on the users on iPhone users. And I think that's how they got me originally, was there was a free trial or something. I know today they give you 3 months for free. So they're giving away the identical product. Apple is giving away for 3 months. I don't believe Spotify's free trial is nearly as attractive. Maybe it's 1 month. So Apple is giving away this software, Apple Music, and Spotify just hit an all-time high. It just reported earnings. It's doing better than it's ever done. And so those are two very egregious examples of ultimately what were commodity products. TurboTax was commodity accounting software. Bill Gates and Microsoft could have replicated it 1-to-1, and they had control of distribution in a very profound way. They could have made it native to the Windows operating system. Apple, it's the same story with Apple versus Spotify. Virtually identical products. And Apple, I mean, there's maybe antitrust would start getting involved, US antitrust would start getting involved, but Apple could just pop up a notification on your homepage at any time and say, use Apple Music 6 months for free. They have hundreds of billions of dollars in cash. They could give this product away for free. It's a commodity product. They could destroy Spotify if they really wanted to. Of course, antitrust would get involved. If they really wanted to, they could just shut down their free cash flow for a year and eliminate Spotify. Give Apple Music away totally for free. But it doesn't happen. And you could argue why it's not happening. But these are two very egregious examples where there's commodity products being pushed through this monopolistic control of distribution, which is similar to Amazon and Amazon Prime. That's ultimately a distribution vector where Amazon is connected to these customers and there's distribution there, and it's a very durable connection. And so they can just push Amazon Prime, Amazon Pharmacy, all of these things. So those are two examples.
Do either of you have any idea how much overlap there is between HIM's customer base and Amazon's Prime customer base? There's some speculation from the Needham report that there may not be that much overlap because HIM's primarily serves low-income people. Is that your experience, Dr. H? What do you think about that, Lewis? Is there anything to that?
I'm not exactly sure if HIMS is primarily serving lower income patients. I certainly see when I was on HIMS, the patients there, knew what the pricing was for HIMS products and were comfortable paying that amount. And as I mentioned before, HIMS's generic medicines can be more expensive than if you were to get generic medicines from elsewhere. So for those people, a majority of the times, they knew the cost and were okay with it. So they wanted a service in their product and paid a slight premium for it to get this. So I'm not exactly sure if that's fully accurate, that the main population base for HIMSS patients is more lower income. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know either, but what I would say is that I think HIMSS offers a very premium experience. I think it's, akin to Uber in the sense that people are like, oh, use Uber, it's cheap. And it's like, this is one of the most mind-blowing human technologies in the history of mankind, that you can just like use this like magic wand in the form of your iPhone, and all of a sudden transportation arrives that will take you anywhere. Like it's an unbelievable premium experience. And I think HIMSS offers a similarly premium experience, but I can't comment. I'll say that the marketing is targeted at probably a lower to middle income demographic.
Do you really think so, Lewis? I sort of think it's the opposite, where their marketing is so sexy. It's completely targeted to like, flashy 29-year-olds.
I'm more in agreement with Jonathan. I think it's targeted to more middle class to professionals almost. People who are just, tired of, trying to get into their doctors and waiting 4 weeks to get an appointment. They want a nice customized treatment that they can get on a quicker timeline. And I think it's more geared towards middle to professionals.
Yeah, I mean, the psychology of their marketing is.
They're advertising.
That's a whole podcast.
It is. But like they're taking out pages in the New York Times. They're advertising during the Super Bowl and other, top tier sporting events. And so catering to, at minimum, the middle class.
This is a very important aspect of my rebuttal to the 20% sell-off today, which is the idea that medicine is education. Nobody's hopping on finasteride without a trusted source guiding them to that. Whether it's online forums or their primary care physician or the HIMSS brand, nobody's nobody's hopping on finasteride like they're shopping for bananas at Walmart. Nobody's doing it. That would be, and maybe there's 1% of people, and there's risks associated with every medication. There's a lot of people take a decade to get on finasteride. They have to be coaxed and taught and prodded and have the explanation provided to them about how, it inhibits DHT production, all of these ideas and what that actually means. And that's just one product amongst, the whole set of products. So this idea, it's like, we started with, I've never even heard of Amazon Pharmacy. And I use Amazon weekly, multiple times per week. I use Amazon Prime. I've never heard of the pharmacy. Maybe it's popped up. It's just never, I can't remember thinking, oh, I'm going to buy pharmaceuticals from Amazon. So there's a huge educational trust component to this business model. And, think back to what I was just sharing about the commodity software, Intuit versus Microsoft, and Spotify versus Apple. It's like, this is just the tip. What I'm describing here is just the tip of the iceberg of differentiation of HIMSS from the many, many, thousands of other sources for instance, finasteride.
With the trust in psychology that you mentioned, Lewis, I think one of the Discord members mentioned just earlier today, and they said, no one's going to get their meds from Amazon. Why would they do that? Like, no one truly wants to do that. It's like, you have, a Walmart pharmacy, like a brick and mortar Walmart pharmacy, and then you have your other more trusted local, Smith's pharmacy. I feel you can make that comparison. How can a Smith's pharmacy with your local pharmacist and people that you trust, how are they surviving, and have people prefer to use that when they could get the medicine from Walmart for 10% cheaper or 20% cheaper? So I think the total market, the market for healthcare is so massive. There's a world where these can both be successful, and Amazon or Walmart might attract people who want the bottom dollar, lowest cost, and others maybe who HIMS is trying to attract are more comfortable with someone that they feel is perceived as more trustworthy with a higher quality product in a more personalized attention. So that might be what, HIMS is really banking on. And I think that's what they're banking on as they make this push for customized treatments, is they want to gear their company towards that market.
Yeah, and that takes the ideas that I shared even a step further. It's like, again, anchoring to this idea that Intuit was successful and Spotify had been successful while going up against incumbents with virtually effectively infinite resources who were placing their products perfectly next to, Spotify and Intuit's product. But it's like, all right, so number one, education is a differentiating factor. And number two, there's a personalization element to this that further differentiates it. So, we're now a few steps of differentiation beyond these anchoring examples that have been successful. And I think the differentiation it only continues to grow.
Well, that was 30 minutes on Amazon. I think that was very substantive. Let's move to the news. You want to throw one more?
I should throw one other thing.
You may.
I appreciate it. I had a few ideas going into this that I wanted to touch on. And they're all historical context. And there's other examples of incumbents leveraging their distribution. Again, what does distribution mean? That means Microsoft has this connection with billions of Windows users, and it can just flow products through that. Getting your foot in the door of the customer, having them use your first product that's the wedge product. It's very challenging. And that's why we talk about this multi-product platform idea. HIMS wedges in with one product. That's the CAC per net new sub. That's an indication of how well they are wedging in a product. The CAC to net new sub metric. Ultimately, that's the most challenging part. And once they get that wedge in, then they can go multi-condition and develop this relationship over years and decades. My main point about this, and I think I may have lost a point somewhere in there, but my main point is that there's this interesting dynamic. There's many different historical examples of companies using distribution and incumbents and the new entrants, the upstarts, the small companies succeeding. There's many examples of that. We could go through more, but the other thing that I wanted to mention was the idea that there's this unique. People think that the people at Amazon, I say the world is detached from X, but if there are people tapped into X, it's going to be people in Silicon Valley. It's going to be people in Seattle. It's going to be people in Boston. It's going to be people in Manhattan.
I just want to push back on the idea that X is completely detached from the real world. I'm actually on board with the idea that the news happens first on Twitter and X these days, but I do understand your point. It is a different universe in many ways.
All right. Well, I get the histrionics of virality, right? These posts that are so sensational that go viral. There may be a kernel of truth, but they're detached. I think they're detached. Anyway, so I think the main minds though that are tapped into X are in Seattle, Manhattan, Boston, and maybe LA a little bit, maybe not, but San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And so these individuals, there's probably people from Amazon, from Apple, from large tech companies watching this right now. I'm actually virtually positive because I've been creating content on the internet for a while, and so many people from these large centers have interacted with me and worked for me. So these individuals are watching this content. They're saying, okay, HIMS is this big revolutionary technology. We have to work on this. Or buy now, pay later is this big revolutionary technology. We got to work on this. Or AI, or whatever's trending, whatever's going viral on X, on social media, whatever. And anytime there's something big that arises, it's like this. It's like stocks. It's like the stock market. There's this herd that rushes to this trend, this idea, whatever it is. And so for those that are watching this, you're a HIM, you like HIMS, right? This isn't coincidental. I know from experience, the fact that Amazon is doing this and that Hims House exists and that you're excited about it and that the posts are going viral on X, none of this is coincidental. It's all a part of this herd mentality that executives in these corporations get wrapped up in, and they push really hard in this one direction. They start publishing more news. They start trying to put out what they're doing is front and center. We're on the front lines of this new trend. It's very exciting. We're going to make money from it. And think about any, Shopify in the 2010s, Slack, like you noted, Slack was going berserk, Zoom was going berserk, Peloton. These are examples of things that have not worked out well. But all of these trends, buy now, pay later, telehealth, all of these trends get wrapped up, and then the corporations see this massive trend and they flock to it. And I think that that's largely what's happening right now.
Are we ready to move?
I'm done. Yeah. That was all I wanted to touch on.
Next topic is the post that Andrew Dudum made yesterday about GLP-1s. We don't have to spend too long on this. We've talked about it a number of times. But he made this long post on the Hims website. Hims has launched a GLP-1 supply tracker. It's been up for a couple months. So far, 80,000 reports of shortage since September. There is, of course, this decision that's coming in Fort Worth about the shortage status of tirzepatide on November 21st. Almost certainly will move the stock. Almost certainly has implications for future revenue. Ro has a supply tracker as well, I should add. How do each of you see this move by Dudum and the decision to double down on the idea that semaglutide and tirzepatide are very much in shortage, at least as reported by consumers?
I think they're preparing for whatever the decision is, and if it's a potentially negative decision, I think he's preparing the company to challenge this decision and to basically fight to be able to continue prescribing the medicines for people who are wanting it and can't get it. So I think it's being set up right now to defend their position in the potential possibility that it's a not favorable one for the Hims company.
I mean, Dr. H, I think I would just defer to Dr. H on this entire topic. But obviously it's good that Hims is tracking this. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Dr. H? Because I'm going to kind of take the conversation in a weight loss direction, but slightly
with these startup companies, when they're in a whole new world that they're dealing with regulations and uncertainty. I know a lot of these startup companies have a very robust legal team, attorneys who are specialized in healthcare law and things like that. So everything that they've been doing guaranteed has been looked at 10, 1,500 times over by their legal representation. So if Ro is doing a tracker, if Hims is doing a tracker, if the Hims CEO is presenting themselves as being very confident that they can continue with this type of treatment, if they're doing these steps, it's all done with their legal counsel. And if they are doing all these things, I think they're getting up for a potential battle, in courtrooms or lawsuits and things like that. So I don't think Hims will go down quietly. If it's a negative decision by the FDA, for sure, Jonathan, their stocks are probably going to bear the brunt of that. But long term, I think they are really preparing themselves to defend their position and basically continue the type of treatment.
So the direction that I was going to take it is related to weight loss, so I'm not going to get too far off topic. But I just want to remind everybody that weight loss is a product in which there are a series of products, and those series of products, ex-GLP-1s, have grown at an incredible rate. They have been Hims' most successful product category in the company's history in terms of the rate at which it has scaled in the first year. And so with or without GLP-1s, in my estimation, we're going to be fine. Through this narrow lens of right now, this very discussion, without GLP-1s, we'll be fine. This is not. And Dr. H, could you speak to the succession of starting with perhaps liraglutide, or starting with something in the weight loss category and then maybe going to oral, or capturing a customer and then adjusting the dosage or the medication? Is there truth to that thinking? I think you mentioned it.
Yeah, I mentioned, I think in the last podcast, even if HIMSS is not able to, prescribe semaglutide, tirzepatide, they mentioned they're going to have the generic Victoza, liraglutide available. And it may be a very successful way to market to people, saying basically, hey, yeah, it sucks. We can't offer you semaglutide or tirzepatide. We have this other option available to GLP-1. It's available. We can prescribe it for you conveniently. I think it's a great way to get patients into the HIMSS ecosystem and platform. Patients will try it for a few months. They may love it. They may find that it's actually not that great for themselves specifically. And, no one can get Ozempic or Wegovy or Mounjaro because, they're all brand names and supposedly it's available, but they can't afford it. So that's an easy transition then for the HIMSS physician to say, I'm sorry you're having these side effects. I'm sorry it's not what we expected. Hey, we have all these other legacy weight loss medicines in an oral form that's pretty comparable for results, 5%, 6%, 10% weight loss. It's a daily medicine. I mean, you're doing a daily injection with your generic Victoza now anyways. So we could easily switch you in the meantime while you're looking to find an alternative way to get brand name medicines, which we all know will be very difficult. But the physician can then point them in a direction and say, let's try it out. We've had great success. Check out our Reddit forums. Many people are singing songs about the oral medicines. So they can easily transition from one treatment to the other if things don't work out the way that the patient hopes or intends or wants to. And, this is a situation where if the FDA makes a ruling where no one can sell compounded semaglutide, I mean, we're all going to be on the same level playing field, but HIMSS has this backup option where they can do the generic Victoza. They can switch them to the oral medicines too.
Yeah, and I would add that it's worth remembering that, for instance, the North Carolina public healthcare system decided not to cover GLP-1s. And there's going to be tens of millions of people in America that cannot access branded GLP-1s. So, do with this information what you will, those listening. But as soon as the shortages end, there's going to be if this is such a life-saving drug, there's going to be a health crisis. That's just, if the drug is what it is, according to the news and Novo and Eli Lilly and the FDA, then there is set to be a legitimate health crisis as soon as the shortage ends. Because, for instance, Michigan's Blue Cross and Blue Shield, or whatever their healthcare system is called, doesn't cover GLP-1s. They drop coverage. Same could be said for North Carolina. And because America's healthcare system is capitalistic Wild West, there are just tens of millions of people that don't have healthcare who will not be able to access this medication. So that's just sort of an aside, but to Dr. H's point, they're going to be looking for some medication. They're going to be looking for some intervention, some help in terms of addressing their weight. And HIMSS will have an assortment of products on its platform that offer, a path to losing weight. And I think, what's coming to my mind is the various ways of losing weight. And I think that's related to last week's podcast where we talked about the food that HIMSS is going to start offering on its platform. And it's like, that's an example of, they're doing their best to actually address the customer's issues. We can all browbeat the customer to go, do a push-pull leg split in the gym every week and eat high protein, lower carb, good fats. But just the reality is not everyone's going to do that. and they're going to look for ways to lose weight. And Hims is creating a comprehensive assortment of products to serve people. And you know, it's a ethical consideration, but I've kind of arrived at the conclusion that it's like, you know, what if people want the products, they're not willing to, you know, go on bodybuilding.com, then here's the alternative.
This reminds me of some comments I got from patients just a few weeks ago when that tirzepatide became not on shortage and some of the companies had to switch people off of tirzepatide. The patients were literally saying, I am so bummed by this FDA decision. I was finally able to afford compounded tirzepatide. It's the only thing that's worked. I've been trying to lose weight for the past 15 years. I've tasted some results and some success. I can't stop now. I will do literally anything to switch to another medicine that might work as well, or even partially as well, because for the first time in their lives, their obesity has been something they could tangibly work on and actually get results on. So I think the psychology of that is very powerful, that they're like, you know, I've seen myself getting better, even if it's the first step of 100 steps. I don't want to stop completely. I need something else. You know, switch me to generic fructosa, switch me to the oral medicine. Let's just do it. I don't want to stop my momentum.
Unfortunately, I think on that note, we have to go. We had a hard cutoff today. We will be back next time to discuss maybe animal spirits in the stock market, maybe the political situation, which could bear on Hims at some point. For now, this has been Hims House episode 13. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. The good chat happens in the Discord, so be sure to hop in there. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.